This is The Competitive Edge with Chris Taylor. Welcome to The Competitive Edge. My name is Scott Britton, and I'm here to help you answer a question that we all have. How can I get an edge in my business and life? Each week, we're going to uncover how some of the most successful and inspiring entrepreneurs, entertainers, and thought leaders get an edge so you too can reach your full potential. Thanks for tuning in today. Now let's get started. All right, welcome to another episode of the Competitive Edge podcast. If you're anything like me, you probably love reading business books or any nonfiction book for that matter. The challenge is there's like a zillion of them out there, and there's just no way that we can read all the ones that would provide value to us while still maintaining a productive and normal personal and professional life. Well, my guest today, Chris Taylor, is the CEO of a company called Actionable Books that helps people solve exactly that problem by providing busy professionals the most applicable lessons from the best business books out there. And not only giving the lessons, but also helping people apply them. I really love this conversation with Chris because we kind of go all over the place, but every single thing we talk about, I found incredibly valuable and interesting. This guy at 22 years old was running a sales team of 120 people. So we talk about how Chris was able to do that, some of the lessons he learned, as well as stuff that's present today, like the lessons he's learned building a company that he operates while he travels the world. Things like how to find the best employees that work remotely, and also how to get the most out of these people. And I think there's a lot of really good universally applicable lessons for just how to lead and inspire people, whether that's in your company, whether that's amongst your friends. So if that's an interesting topic to you, you're really going to like this episode. I also really enjoyed some of Chris's tips on how he's been able to do things like land interviews with 46 of the New York Times best-selling authors. Pretty impressive stuff. There's a whole lot of things that I loved in this interview, and I think you will too. So let's not delay any longer and hear from Chris Taylor. Chris, how you doing, man?
I'm great, Scott. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. And where are you coming from today?
Today, I am coming from the suburbs of Barcelona, Spain.
Wow, man, that is awesome. Barcelona is an amazing place. So I want to just take this moment to actually brag a little bit more about Chris before we ask him how he got a competitive edge in his business and life. By the time Chris was 22 years old, he was leading a sales team of 120 independent contractors. And then he left direct sales in 2006 to pursue his passion of leadership and team culture development and start Actionable Books in 2008. And now he lives in Spain and travels around the world and runs his business, which is just so cool. So Chris, I have a ton of questions for you, how you've done all this awesome stuff. And I cannot wait to dig in.
Great. Let's do it.
Awesome. So Chris, where were you born?
Where was I born? I was born in Vancouver, Canada, just outside of Vancouver, actually, and spent the first few years of my life there on the West Coast.
Awesome. I've never been, heard amazing things. And
it's a great city.
Let's fast forward to 22 years old, leading a sales team of 120 people. Chris, most people, when they're 22 years old, are trying to figure out how to get a job. And here you are leading 120 independent contractors. Take me through how you were able to do that. And let's just start from the very beginning.
All right, sure. Yeah. So, as you sort of alluded to in the intro there, I was working for a direct sales company. So when I was in university, I took a job as a sales rep for a direct sales company, actually selling kitchen knives. And it was one of those yeah, everyone's story, right? It turns out I was pretty good at it. And so I rose quickly as a sales rep. And then they gave me an opportunity between my third and fourth year of university to actually run my own office for 4 months. And so I went and did that and did well. We were the number 2 or number 3 office in Canada that summer. So when I graduated, I took an offer to open up an office for them in, actually it was back in Vancouver then, in a suburb of Vancouver. And, yeah, we did well quickly. I mean, we were never one of the largest offices. But one of the things that we did well was hang on to our people. And so I spent, I can get into the tactics on that, but, we grew steadily and people didn't leave as fast as they did in a lot of other places. So, got to a point where we had, a sizable sales force and, we're having a lot of fun doing it. So, when I was 22, life was pretty fabulous.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I actually want to dive into that just a little bit because, I talk to a lot of people about business development stuff. And
sure.
One of the things they always want to know is, how do I get new customers? How do I get more customers, more clients, more business? Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't focus on extracting more value or keeping existing customers. And it sounds like you were able to do that really well, which is part of the reason for your success. Can you kind of talk about tactically some of the things that you did to keep these customers that maybe a lot of other sales reps selling knives weren't doing?
Yeah, sure. So I think there's two pieces in there. I mean, on a customer retention standpoint and on an employee or rep retention standpoint, I think, it's going to sound trite, Scott, but it comes down to thinking of them as human beings. And, we treat our friends and our family one way. And for some reason in the business setting, we get caught up with the speed of, or the numbers maybe, or just having to hit quotas. And we stop thinking about people as people and we start thinking about them as a means to an end. And, if we ever thought of our friends that way, we would find ourselves without friends. And so I don't think it's surprising that, clients are agnostic and not super loyal to brands that only come back to them when they want to hit them up for more cash. And so, whether it was clients and doing client appreciation events or just calling them up to say, hey, how's it going? How's that product working out for you? And stop there and not trying to upsell them onto the next thing, goes a long way. And the same can be said for, at the time with reps and now with employees and the work that we do with clients with helping them to retain and develop their people. One of the things I picked up a couple of years ago, and I don't even know who it was from, but fundamentally all human beings want to be heard, understood, and appreciated, or hoo-ah for short.
Nice.
And yeah, it's memorable that way, right? And it's not rocket science. I mean, if we take the time to actually connect with people, whether they're employers, employees, customers, family, friends, neighbors, and help them feel heard, understood, and appreciated, nothing but good comes from those relationships.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And it seems so obvious, but yet again, it's one of these things that a lot of times we just don't do. Were there any specific practices you would do with your reps to make them feel that sense of being heard, understood?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked because that was really the answer is yes. And what we did actually led to the creation of actionable books and actionable workshops, specifically, which is our main product line now. What I would do on a weekly basis, again, not super complicated, is I would take the top 10% of my sales force, so roughly 10 to 12 people a week, and we would get together on a Saturday morning, typically outside of office hours, and we would sit down and we would talk and I would teach them something not to do with sales, not to do with product. We wouldn't talk about contests or incentives or anything. What we would talk about was something personal or professional development related. We would spend an hour going through, an article maybe or part of a book or an entire book that I'd read or that they'd read. And I would turn it into, I'd spend hours prepping this thing. I would guide them through conversation around how that idea resonated for them personally, how they could put it into practice in their life. And we would actually leave that session with each person committing to a single point of action or behavior change. Excuse me.
That is so cool. Dude, I've had this dream my whole life of creating a company where personal development is stressed just as much as professional development. And I think they're very much one and the same. Is that
Absolutely.
Something that you currently practice still today at Actionable Books?
Yeah, internally, definitely. And externally, that's what we work to do. All of the programs that we've developed, we can talk about Actionable Books, but basically everything that we've developed is around, helping team leaders and their direct reports take those brief timeout moments to get away from the fires that need to be put out and the calls that need to be returned and the quotas that need to be met and actually say, okay, so we are human beings and we are dedicating a good chunk of our existence to advancing the company's objectives. How is this advancing our own objectives? And, it's interesting because the clients that embrace what we do, it can be a risky proposition because if the company doesn't in no way advance the personal objectives, then, you run the risk of exposing that and having people leave. What we find is the companies that have the guts to have those conversations with their employees are, fertile ground for individuals to develop themselves and to move forward. So everything that we do is about bringing those conversations to the forefront and then helping individuals and companies put the ideas into practice so that they're actually really creating, yes, this is going to advance my career and my life. And this is the first step to actually doing that. So that's the type of work that we do.
Amazing. And would you say it's safe to say, just so we can kind of bring this into a cohesive message here for the audience, that amongst the companies that you've worked with, and maybe some that chose not to work with you, would you say that companies can achieve a competitive edge by investing in personal development stuff that might not even be related directly to the business tasks that they do every single day?
Absolutely. And I think we're starting to see it more and more, thankfully, even in mainstream media, where the companies that are truly rocking their industries are the ones that are putting that focus on the people and appreciating that, it's that cheesy line that people are our greatest asset. It's, no, people are your business. I mean, unless your business is completely 100% automated, people are the ones who are driving that forward and giving them a place where they feel as though, and legitimately so, that they're advancing their personal and professional lives. They will bleed for the business, and you'll have that competitive edge, no question.
Chris, you're so right, man. I think about my last employer, who before I became a self-employed entrepreneur, and I think about all the things that motivated me, that made me want to give the extra effort, come in early, stay late, make sure that I had attention to detail. Dude, it wasn't the paycheck. It wasn't the raise. It wasn't the bonus. It was because I loved my boss, and I loved him because he invested in me, took care of me, and he cared about my personal and professional development a lot. And that made me incredibly loyal. So what you're saying right now is just music to my ears, man.
Well, there's a quote that's gets passed around a lot, that's usually attributed to Marcus Buckingham, where it says that people don't quit jobs, people quit managers. And I think it's totally true. I know it's true and statistically proven. But the other side of the conversation is true too, where the reason that people go above and beyond in a lot of cases, to your point, is because of that relationship with their managers and also with their peers.
Such a good point. Such a good point. So Chris, let's fast forward a little bit. You mean
Sure.
you're killing it as a direct sales leader. You have hundreds of people working for you, and you leave all that to go pursue your passion of leadership and team and culture development and start a company called Actionable Books that today, I mean, you guys work with New York Times bestselling authors. You've summarized hundreds of books. You're educating people all over the world. In fact, in 9 countries. Take me through the early days of that and how you were able to accomplish how you were able to get to where you are today.
All right. So this story may take a little bit of a twist from what you're expecting, Scott, right at the beginning. So yeah, things were going really well with the direct sales company. We were one of the top productivity offices in North America. As we covered earlier, I was 22 years old and I was making more money than all my friends combined. And that success went straight to my head. I became fairly difficult to be around. I stopped doing all of the things that I'd done right to grow the practice. Started completely ignoring any sort of, bill payment and this sort of thing. And what had taken about 14, 16 months to build up, was pretty much decimated over the course of the following 8 months as I became this cocky SOB that, figured the world owed him something. So I left, but I left on the bottom, man. I didn't leave on the top. I left the practice with my tail between my legs to, curl up in my parents' basement back on the other side of the country, licking my wounds and trying to figure out what the hell had happened to this empire that I'd built. And so Actionable Books was really born out of a place of that. I started reading a lot to try to figure out what had happened. Started to realize that maybe it was something I did and not that the world had been mean to me. And reading all these books, I found that there's a lot of great ideas in there, but that my life was stagnating. I wasn't really moving anything forward. I was consuming knowledge, but I wasn't putting it into practice. And so, Actionable Books, the website, which actually had a different name back then, was really born out of a personal mission of mine to actually put some of these ideas into practice. So I committed in 2007 to read a book a week per year, and not just to read the book, but to actually take one idea from each book and put it into practice in my life. So the theory was that if I could make 52 small behavior or attitude changes over the course of a year, then I could effectively reinvent the way I was interacting with the world and really replace that not so pleasant guy that I'd become. So it started from a pretty dark place, Scott.
Wow, that is so inspiring. And 52 books, man, that is a lot. I mean, did you just spend all of your time reading each week? I'm trying to, and maybe this is kind of the genesis of Actionable Books, because I can barely read one book a month. And because it does take a lot of time. So was there something in that process that ignited this idea for condensing these into easy to digest, quick, actionable summaries that people could take action on?
Well, it was this idea, this concept that sort of led me for the last 7 or 8 years, which is ideas are only valuable when they're applied. And so, to think about if you've got a business problem or even a sort of life challenge, to first of all, identify the book that's going to best solve that amongst the piles of books that are published each year, find the right book, then actually take the time to go buy that book, read that book, think about that book, and put something into practice from that book. I mean, that's a very small percentage of the population actually gets through that process. So we were, with Actionable, I was doing it for myself. It was completely self-serving. It was sort of a self-accountability blog originally that's turned into something for other people. But it was really that. It was, if we can jumpstart the process, if we can move through that sort of curve, to the other side of here's the gem, how are you going to put it into practice? Then, that could be helpful for me as a reminder, and sort of thinking through that made it easier for me to commit to that change. And for other people, if they read it and took something from it, then so much the better. So, everything that we did around that was really geared towards, making it easier to apply the ideas. Going back to your first question about reading the book, there's a lot of different people that talk about, different ways to read and stay committed to the schedule. For me personally, it's typically, sort of longer bursts of time. Like I enjoy reading for 3 or 4 hour stints. But people that are really busy and don't have those 3 or 4 hour pauses or haven't, sort of put those into their life, reading 10 pages a day covers a book a month, right? I mean, that's 300 pages a month, which most business books are less than that. And 10 pages will take you, half an hour maybe? So doing it in the morning or doing when you first get home or doing it at lunch or whatever. It's totally reasonable for someone to read a book a month, certainly, and a book a week, just multiply by 4.
Sure. Makes sense. Easy math. Let's hone back in on the actual business building process.
Sure.
So you're reading these books. It sounds like you might have started a blog. When did this become a business?
Yeah, so it was a blog in 2007, and by early 2009, I'd continued with it. I did it for 2 years, so we had just over 100 summaries on the site. And I had a number of friends who were leading teams, particularly in the sales world, who remembered what I'd done or knew about what I'd done with these hour-long timeouts that I'd had with my sales team, and wanted to use sort of my template for it. And so what I did was I started taking some of the ideas that were inspired by these books I was reading and started layering them into hour-long discussion guides, modules that team leaders could work through with their staff. We just turned them into basic PDFs, threw them behind a paywall, and started charging people I knew $100 a month to access it. It turned into a business when I interviewed Seth Godin. Some of your listeners may know Seth. He's a fabulous human being. I had finished all of his books by late 2009. And I wanted to know what was going on in his head since. One of the things that I learned that it sort of seems obvious in retrospect is that the day a business book is published, the information in that book is typically upwards of 2 years old. Right? Because there's the writing process and then there's the publishing process. And I wanted to know what he was thinking about now. And so I just reached out to him and asked if he'd be open to an interview, and then fell off my chair when he said yes. So when I went down to New York and met with Seth and talked about, what he'd been thinking about since, a light bulb went off for me, which was that, a lot of the things that I was teaching, if you will, in these workshop modules were things that were not being taught in the classroom. And the skills and attitudes that successful teams were demonstrating in the 21st century were not things that we were taught in the classroom. And that there was a fundamental gap between what we learned in our formal education system and what the people on the leading edge of any industry were applying, and the behaviors and the practices there's a gap there. And so I left my job. I started focusing on teaching those skills and attitudes through this vehicle of actionable workshops, to anyone that was interested. And that was the business started in 2009.
And Chris, were these in-person events that you were putting on? You mentioned $100 paywall. Can you kind of get into the weeds here and talk about logistically exactly what that looked like?
Yeah, for sure. So what we created were 42 modules. The modules were designed to be completely self-sufficient. So anybody who led a team of people could access the workshop. It still has a training video, which would teach them how to run the workshop effectively. The leader notes, which are a step-by-step guide for people that have never facilitated anything in their life. They can pick this thing up. They could literally read it off the page and have an effective hour-long session with their team. So those are the two primary vehicles. Since then, we've added an accountability loop where basically after the workshop session, everybody who participated in that session, which again was led by the local team leader, so not us, but by the local team leader, they'll be pinged via email to provide feedback on what their biggest takeaway was from the session, how they're planning on applying that, and by when. And that accountability, that commitment to change is fed back to the leader on the dashboard that they have. And then it enables the leader to have intelligent one-on-one follow-up conversations with their team members to say, hey, I saw this was important to you. I saw you wanted to do this by this date. What can I do to help? And, we talked earlier about the importance of strengthening those bonds between leader and team. This has been one of the simplest and yet most effective tools that we've seen at helping to strengthen those relationships and, really lead to a better working environment.
Makes total sense. And so basically you guys are just providing the tools in terms of content and software to arm all these people to have the most effective teams possible.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we learned by sort of mid 2010, we realized that, some really forward thinking leaders were comfortable grabbing this and running with it on their own. The vast majority of leaders wanted some sort of hands-on support for it. So we launched the Actionable Consultant Program in 2010, which was basically licensing business coaches and consultants to use our material in their own practice, but then also to support those clients who were using our tools. So the Actionable Consultant Program now basically becomes a really interesting tool for us and has rapidly become one of the most effective parts of our business, where we partner with really high quality coaches and consultants. They can use our content and they support our clients. And so our clients have, if they want, that hands-on support. So it's not entirely self-serve. It can be, but most clients choose to have some sort of hands-on engagement.
Chris, I can imagine that there is a lot of people that are trying to sell products to improve the effectiveness of the best coaches out there and coaches in general. And it sounds like you guys have been able to crack that nut in a way here. Is there anything that you did when you presented your product, or maybe even built in the product, that you think kind of gave your product an edge when approaching these people?
Yeah, it's an unapologetic values stance, and basically saying this is who we are. These are the people that get what we do, and you're either on this side of the line or that side of the line. And if you're on that side of the line, no problem. But we're not going to bend or compromise the program to grab a buck from somebody who kind of likes it but wants it tweaked. It's Simon Sinek's Start With Why. I mean, we come from there's two sort of core tenets to our Actionable Consultant Program. One is the belief that there is value in business books and that they really needs to be pulled out and applied in the workforce. And that through the act of that, you can strengthen relationships. Sorry, I guess sort of part B to that is that there is nothing more important in business than the relationship of the immediate working group. So that's piece number one. And then piece number two is we only work with consultants that have the mission of getting in, making as big an impact as possible, and getting out as fast as possible. And that, in my experience with consultants, I mean, there's a pretty clear divide there of consultants that are looking for effectively a job, but, want it on the sort of consultancy basis where they just want to stay there ongoing. And that's cool. And there are places and times that makes sense. The consultants that we want to work with are the ones who want to go in, make an impact and get out and move on to the next one, but leave the client self-sufficient so that they don't need to rely on the consultant moving forward. So to answer your question more directly, it wasn't so much what we did as the way in which we did it, which is giving people, a flag to say, this is, I either believe this or I don't. And it's worked out so well for us so far from a caliber of person that we're attracting. It's been amazing.
Chris, do you think that anybody can do that in business? Take this fight or flight stance, you're on my team or you're not? Or do you think that you need to have some things in place besides just the conviction for that to be an effective strategy?
Yeah, no question. I mean, you have to have a viable product and I'm happy to go into the product in as much detail as possible. But I think that more and more and more, we're flooded with options. If you're looking for anything, there's a virtually infinite number of options with a quick Google search. Just to be on the playing field, we have to have a competitive price. We have to have a competitive product. Actually, I would say you have to have an exceptional product and you have to have a very, very cost effective price. Which is great. It sort of raises the bar to a certain level of professionalism. But at that stage, there's still a ton of options. And so we are naturally attracted to the brands and the organizations and the people that we feel see the world through a similar lens to us or share a certain value set. I mean, this is the nature of, most of Seth Godin's work for the last 15 years. This is, Dan Pink's been talking about this, or Ken Robbins is talking about this. I mean, this is, sort of becoming the standard, is that you need to have more than just your product. And as an entrepreneur in particular, you need to have more than just the dollar signs attached to it. Because if you're trying to sell something to everyone, you just get watered down and drowned out by the competition.
Yeah, that makes total sense, just having that direct appeal. And one of the things that I think about, and I don't know where I read this, but it was in some persuasion book, that the most persuasive person in the room is the one that has the most conviction about what they believe. And yes, that person is always going to win the argument. They're always going to convince the other person. And ultimately, most people are looking to be led. So picking your side and doubling down on it, it just makes so much sense why that can be so effective.
Yeah. And I think, depending on what that line is, there's still a level of graciousness that can go a long way, right? I mean, just because someone's not on our side doesn't make them less of a human being, so it's making sure that, we go about it with a certain level of professionalism or general human courtesy. But yeah, no, I really believe that. I mean, we get excited when we're connected to, people that believe strongly in something that we believe, even if we couldn't necessarily articulate it before we met them. You hit on something that I just wanted to touch on, which was, that a lot of people want to be led, or most people want to be led. That may very well be the case. The people that I've really enjoyed collaborating with and working with are people that want to join the momentum of what we're doing. But not for a second doesn't mean that they don't want to lead in their own space. And I think we're entering a really neat place now where people can be involved in multiple projects at the same time and give 100% commitment to the various pieces during the time that they're focused on those things. And what I mean by that is, if you think about our consultant network, I mean, our consultants are pretty staunch supporters of what Actionable stands for and does, but Actionable doesn't define them. They have their own brand and their own network and their own clients and their own gigs, and Actionable is something that they can connect with and sort of relate to and promote because they feel confident in it, but it doesn't consume them, right? And I think that's an important differentiator, is that the best relationships that I've ever had professionally and personally are ones where the person is committed to you and your movement, but also has an exceptionally strong sense of self-identity as well.
It's a great balance to strive for, no question. Chris, you touched briefly on actionable interviews, and you told me before this podcast that you've actually interviewed 46 New York Times best-selling authors. Now, these are some of probably the most busy people in the world, and certainly have no shortage of people who want their time. Yep. How did you get in front of these people and get them to commit to give you their time?
I found a common interest. It's sort of a continuation of, I feel like we've got a really nice theme going here, Scott.
Me too.
With any author that I reached out to, I had previously read, if not all of their books, then at least, one or two. I had summarized that book and I had published a summary of that book on the site for free without asking for anything. And in the case of Seth, I'd done that for every one of his books leading up to me asking for his time to continue to spread his message. And I think, you and I were sort of talking a little bit beforehand about the sort of increased explosion of podcasts and, a lot of people, and blogs in general. And I think where people get tired, is when they're being asked for their time, when it's pretty obvious that the purpose of that is because they're a big name and wanting to, get their name on the show. And, Gary Vaynerchuk and I sat down, he was my second interview right after Seth. And we talked about how, of course, yes, my site benefited from having Vaynerchuk on the show. But that wasn't why he agreed to it. And that wasn't even why I asked. I asked because I genuinely was interested in his content and what he had to say. And I think that's what we need. We talk about the passion and the sense of commitment that comes across and can win all the arguments. I think the same thing goes for reaching out to people. If you're reaching out to someone purely for the purposes of adding their name to your roster, I think it loses something, and they can see through it. They get asked every day by lots of people. But if you show that you've done your homework and you believe in what they're doing and you want to talk to them about that for the sake of, the conversation or whatever the purpose is, as much as the name, that for me went a really long way with getting people on the show.
Yeah. The results speak for themselves. And, this actually reminds me of something in my own life. And I've done a ton of cold outreach and networking, with people that, again, are super busy and high leverage and just have a ton of people trying to get a piece of their time. And you kind of alluded to this, is basically identifying something different or unique that they're interested in and trying to connect with them on that. And because everyone else is trying to get their time for the obvious public facing thing, yet far less people are probably trying to get their time for maybe a particular personal interest they have. And because of that, you can be a signal to noise and connect with them much faster and often even at a much deeper level. And an example in my life that sticks out is when I first moved to New York City. I wanted to become friends with a lot of the venture capitalists because I knew that the venture capitalists knew all the entrepreneurs and they also knew which companies were hiring. And so there was a guy named Charlie O'Donnell who now runs Brooklyn Bridge Ventures. He's at First Round Capital. I wanted to get together with him. He seemed like the type of guy I wanted in my life. And every single person was probably asking for coffee to talk about their business or just to talk business in general. And I found out he had a softball team that he played for fun. And instead of trying to connect them about business, I asked if he had any room on a softball team. And I ended up joining the team. And because of the relationship we built around this other activity that far less people were trying to connect with them on, I ended up actually getting a job with one of the portfolio companies,
nice,
which was pretty cool. So I think you're right on when you say anytime you get a chance to connect with somebody on something that you genuinely feel excited about, where it doesn't look like you're just trying to basically push yourself forward, it's just so powerful.
It's that whole, the two tenets there being, give generously, like find a way to provide value for them. Completely lost my train of thought. No idea what my second thing was going to be. Oh, I know what it was. It was, so give generously and think long term. Ideally, if you're, whatever, blog, podcast, show, product, widget, whatever, is going to go the way you want it to go, it's going to be around for years or decades. And so treat it accordingly. It doesn't need to be, if you don't get them in 3 weeks, then you leave, because they're going to see through that. And it's probably not something you should be doing in the first place.
Absolutely. And Chris, right now you're coming to us from Spain, and we talked about this a little bit before. Your employees are all over the world, so you've you kind of set up this business for yourself at this point where you can work wherever you want. You're talked about moving to Panama next year. Mm-hmm. Tell me about how you were able to accomplish that, because that is not an easy thing to do. And maybe we can just focus on one or two things for people that are looking to basically set up this type of location independent business for themselves that they can really focus on in the early days to ensure that.
Sure. I mean, it was a driving objective since the beginning. I wanted the business to be something that was derivative based, meaning I could sell the same thing over and over again. And I wanted it to be something that allowed me to be geographically free. So, really clear on that from the very beginning. And, it allowed me to, when we started hiring employees, really focus on the quality of the individual, not where they were geographically located. So since the beginning, we've never had a physical office for the business. We have a core team of 9 now, I guess, and then the 28 consultants, and then about 95 writers. Everyone, does that from wherever they choose to do it. So, with the hiring process, it was hiring people that worked well independently, which of course they had to because they were working from home. But it also allows me to be time zone independent where, I have regular touch points with my team, and we have a really clear structure that I'm happy to share. But I don't need to be watching them. I mean, it comes down to that whole treat people like human beings, like if your friend tells you they're going to do something, then, unless that friend's a flake, you're going to trust that they're going to do it. And when it comes to team members, it's, the way that I'm able to run the business independently is because they don't need to be managed. I can provide the leadership and the vision, and I can provide support when they need it. But I'm not there to check in on them every day. So that's really been the objective, is to be clear on what you want and then hire good people since the beginning.
Chris, it seems like it's maybe not easy for everyone to hire people that are self-motivated, that don't need somebody hovering over them all the time. I forget exactly how you phrase this, but is there a way to identify the type of person or a method or task that you've used maybe in the hiring process to determine whether this person is a good fit to work in your business and a location independent business?
Yeah, I look to see what else they've started. So what have they done on their own? Have they tried business? Have they their own business? Do they have a blog? Do they have side projects? Because any of the initiative taken to start those things are things that are transferable into, working independently. You need that spirit of somebody who, once they finish their to-do list or whatever, that they don't just sit around or start watching, whatever happens to be on TV, that they actually, have that curiosity and that creativity to start something new. So that's been piece number one. And the other thing that's, been really interesting, and this was not my model from the beginning, but it's something that I've realized in hindsight, is that, every single person on the actionable team does something else as well. Whether it's running a blog or running a podcast or having an entirely separate business, they all do something else as well. And, it's really, I think there's a mentality amongst business owners, particularly at a younger or earlier stage in their practice, where we have this sense of almost needing to own the employees, where, this is all you do and this is all you think about. And there's a risk that if you do anything else, then you're going to realize that, I think it comes from a place of sort of, self deprecation, where we're concerned maybe that if they see what else is out there, that they're going to leave us. The mentality that I've sort of slid into over the last few years comfortably is that employees are going to stay as long as it's of value to them and value to the company, and they feel as though their contributions are being heard, understood, and appreciated. And they will leave at some point. If someone's in a purely employee role where they don't have any sense of equity, the odds of them staying until the day they die are slim to none. And we need to be okay with that. We need to treat the people that we work with, whatever the hierarchy or reporting structure is, as peers and as human beings who can be responsible for themselves and not as children. And when you give that trust and respect and expectation to them, to those people that, have shown that initiative in the past, they really flourish in my experience. And everybody gets more of what they want out of the relationship.
It's so good, man. That's so good. And I think it's just very interesting to me, and maybe to people out there who are thinking about starting a business, that you've actually done two things that sounds like it's allowed you to kind of get an edge in building this business, in that you've made sure to build your business in such a way that you hire the best people, not necessarily the people that are geographically close to wherever you decide to set up shop. And the second thing is that you encourage people, you hire people that have side projects and maybe other interests instead of just solely focusing on the business. And it's almost a signal for initiative, which makes total sense.
And also makes them more fun to work with because they're not, mono focused, right? Which is great.
Absolutely. Chris, I kind of want to transition here into just a few other questions I have for you, because again, I love this story. It's inspiring. I'm motivated. I'm ready to go. But I also love hearing about people's lives away from the desk. And
sure.
It sounds like you've done some very cool things, had your ups and downs, lived a very interesting life. And I just wanted to know whether there was any particular things that you do away from the desk, maybe a habit, ritual, or practice that gives you an edge in your daily life.
Great question. I find that distance creates perspective. I try to put myself in new environments where I'm being stimulated by other things and, sort of immersed in either different cultures or just different experiences. When I was living in Toronto, for several years, it wasn't necessarily leaving Canada as much, but it was, we took a barista class on how to make coffee. You go to try Ethiopian food for the first time or, something different. I find that the constant push to, explore, new things. And now, we're moving, we're exploring different countries and different cultures, but it doesn't have to be on that grandiose scale. I think when, people go, well, I can't do anything new because I don't have a lot of extra money. Well, you could go to a new park and that costs you nothing. Or you could go walk through a fountain. I mean, it doesn't have to be over the top cheesy, but putting myself in new situations creates sort of new neural pathways or something in my brain where ideas flourish. And when I come back, and I work long days by choice, I really enjoy what I do. And coming back to those 12-hour days, I'm refreshed, I'm energized, I'm good to go. And I've got a ton more new ideas that I can't wait to implement. So changing things up is my habit. I'll go with that.
I love that. And I think as entrepreneurs, what we all truly desire is just to be in that state of the creative spark. For as long as we can be in it. And it sounds like for people that are looking to get more of that, this intentional pursuit of new environments and stimuli might be one way to go about achieving that.
It's worked for me.
That's awesome, man. And I want to just finish with the one question that I always like to finish with our guests. And that's, if there's one thing out there that you could tell people to do in order to get an edge and create abundance for their lives, what would it be?
It's sort of continuing from the last point, but maybe more in a business context or life context. I find that regular periods of structured reflection and planning do amazing things for keeping me on track, for appreciating when things have, just checking in with the different direction. And just very quickly, I'll give you my structure. On a weekly basis, I spend an hour a week, typically on a Friday morning where I will review the past week, plan for the next week, looking at it in sort of more granular detail. But is there anything that I'm missing here? On a monthly basis, I will do a full day. Now that I'm here in Spain, I just go to a different room. But when I was in Toronto, I would go to a different location. I turn off my phone and I would actually review activities from the past month and objectives that I'd set for the past month and how I'd done matching with those. And then looking forward to the next month, what objectives do I have for the next 30 days and what do I need to accomplish? And really keeping that list tight and short, but, checking in on, if I've got 26 things on this list, am I a little more scattered than I'd like to be? Could I be more focused? And then on a quarterly basis, I do an overnight. So I do 48 hours. And on an annual basis, I do 3 full days. And I go away somewhere. And I totally alone. And I usually will drink a really good bottle of wine one night. I need a good steak and spend the rest of the time really in that head out of the weeds, looking at what I've accomplished and taking pride in that, looking at the things that I didn't accomplish and what I can learn from that, and looking forward an equal period of time to say, are we on track? What are we tracking to? Is that still what we want? And how do I adjust accordingly? I think that we're in such a busy time of human existence where we are, rushing and constantly have something that we can be doing, typically on that device in our pocket, that if we don't consciously take the time to disconnect, you can spend your entire life being busy, but not actually accomplishing what you want to.
Chris, that is such amazing advice, and I couldn't agree more. And I think the way that our brain operates is that we only, we focus on what questions we choose to ask ourselves. And in order to make sure that we're doing the right things and taking the right actions, we have to be intentional about asking ourselves those questions. And it sounds like you do a great job of that. Chris, if people want to learn more about you and actionable books, what is the best place to go?
Actionablebooks.com would be a good start. Tons of free, almost everything we do is free on there, particularly for individuals. And if anyone wants to connect with me personally, you can find my contact info there, or just shoot me an email, chris@actionablebooks.com.
Awesome. Chris, thank you so much for coming on today. I've learned a lot about you and about my life and what I need to do to move my business forward. Thanks for coming on, man. It's been awesome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, Scott.
Before we finish up with today's Mindshare, I just want to say thanks for listening to another episode of The Competitive Edge. If you enjoyed the ideas in this episode and want access to all the conversations, tactics, and Mindshares we'll be sharing in the future, the best thing you can do is subscribe to The Competitive Edge on iTunes. And while you're there, if you felt like this show has made a positive impact on your day, it'd be great if you could leave us a review on iTunes as well. Now, I know we covered a lot in this episode, and there might be a few key ideas or tools that you want to remember. So we went ahead and compiled all of the notes, links, and even a full searchable transcript of this conversation for you on lifelonglearner.com. That's life-longlearner.com. I also want to give you the details on a cool contest I'm running right now at lifelonglearner.com/fun. By entering the contest, you'll have a chance to win everything from Amazon gift cards to a free month of having your very own dedicated virtual assistant to an opportunity to come and hang out with me and my buds for a few days, where we'll teach you how to create your very own passive income stream. To enter this contest and learn more about everything we're giving away, head on over to lifelonglearner.com/fun. Hey everyone, Scott coming to you with another Mindshare. And today I thought I'd do something really simple. I just wanted to read to everyone the statements that I read to myself every morning or every moment when I'm craving motivation. Because let's face it, entrepreneurship, it can be tough. Whether you're an entrepreneur or not, life can be tough. There's just certain times where you're more motivated than others, and you just need a little extra push to get you over that hump. So today, I want to just share with you the things that I read to myself that make me feel really inspired and empowered and ready to push through any obstacles that I face to get the things that I desire. First statement, you are not that far away. Tweaking is easier than creating. Everything around you was built by someone no smarter than you. Every successful person at one point had to grind and endure some hardships before emerging. Strive to push your limits. Do not strive to survive or finish. Celebrate your wins. Have fun. So these are the things that I read to myself in the mornings, and at times I'm like, gosh, this is just mountain is way higher than I thought, and the climb is long. So hopefully this kind of gave you a little bump today. And I recommend just keeping a little journal of the things that you feel inspired when you hear, and being able to recall those and putting them in one place you can recall them when you want to. It just is a great practice. It's been super helpful for me. All right. Thanks again for listening. Have an amazing day and be inspired.